Against these odds, Washington has precious little time to turn this woefully undisciplined, underprepared, and undersupplied army into a force that will have to stand up against the strongest army in the world. Lexington, Concord, Bunker Hill. All the skill and experience in the world can't help British forces tame the chaos in the colonies. Thomas Gage now has only 7,000 soldiers, surrounded by Washington's 16,000.
The loss we have sustained is greater than we can bear. Small armies can't afford such losses. The rebels' number is great, so many hands have been employed. I wish this cursed place was burned. Thomas Gage.
October 11th, 1775. Without fanfare and without honors, General Thomas Gage is relieved of his command. Once Britain's most powerful man in America, he returns home alone and disgraced. General William Howe steps into Gage's boots and is already knee-deep in the American quagmire. In London, King George roundly rejects the Olive Branch petition, Continental Congress's last grasp for peace. On October 26th, in his annual speech to Parliament, the King throws down the gauntlet.
It has now become the part of wisdom to put a speedy end to these disorders by the most decisive exertions. King George III.
What the King wants is a military solution to a political problem. But his call for war is anything but unanimous among Britain's people and politicians. But when Parliament votes, war carries the day. The military is ordered to send thousands more troops and a full armada to quell America's escalating revolution. Reinforcements can't come too soon for General William Howe. Hemmed in by the rebel siege, he and his army are virtual prisoners on the Boston Peninsula, along with 1,000 loyalists they're protecting. With no access to the countryside, they are unable to forage for food or wood. Supply ships from England have yet to arrive. The people in Boston are running out of provisions and fuel. Across the river in Cambridge, Washington is battling his own war of attrition. With the year about to come to an end, so will many enlistments, and short-timers will soon be leaving in droves. And now, Congress is pushing him to let go of some of his most loyal soldiers, African Americans. From the very beginning, free Northern blacks have been serving well the Patriot cause, with the same concerns as their white compatriots.
There was no militia unit that didn't have black men. They were at Bunker Hill, they were at Concord and Lexington and everywhere else. But recruiting black soldiers, that he had trouble with because the Continental Congress had trouble with it.
Now that the Army is a continental army, not just a local northern one, armed blacks have created a loaded issue in Congress. Southern states are adamantly opposed to making soldiers out of them. Washington is no different from any other Southern planter regarding blacks. He sounds like the Southern slaveholder he is when he issues his order banning black recruits.
The rights of mankind and the freedom of America will have numbers sufficient to support them without resorting to such wretched assistance. George Washington.
The great irony is that the one man closest to the general is a black man, his slave, Billy Lee. For the 7 years since Washington acquired him, Lee has been his master's valet and constant companion. Washington calls him my family.
Billy Lee was more than just a slave to George Washington. He was his personal slave. Billy Lee went with him every place.
If George Washington was the best horseman in Virginia, Billy Lee was the second best. And he and Washington would horseback ride just about every day.
And so the two of them presented quite a picture that was noticed over and over by people at the time who wrote about Washington and his male servant, Billy Lee.
You could say that Billy Lee, in fact, was a close friend of George Washington, even though he was a slave.
Washington and Congress's decision to reject black soldiers plays perfectly into the enemy's hands. The Royal Governor of Virginia, Lord Dunmore, issues a proclamation that welcomes blacks to the British side.
I do hereby declare all indentured servants, Negroes, or others that are able and willing to bear arms, free, they joining His Majesty's troops as soon as may be. Lord Dunmore.
The Dunmore Proclamation wreaks havoc throughout Virginia. Thousands of slaves flee their masters for this chance at freedom.
If you have the opportunity to throw in your lot with people who are promising you a much better situation than you have had, you'd be silly not to take that promise seriously.
It was the best opportunity for freedom they had ever seen, and they never knew whether such an opportunity would ever present itself again.
You know, Thomas Jefferson estimates that in Virginia alone, 30,000 African Americans walked off to plantations, and many of them became British soldiers.
So for the British, this is wonderful. They're not only sapping the colonial economy by depriving it of slave labor, but they've added to their fighting force.
Free blacks travel secretly from plantation to embolden slaves to escape. If they are caught, they risk death or torture. While the fight for liberty in the South threatens to blow the slave culture apart, the approaching new year threatens to dissolve Washington's Northern Army.
We are now without any money in our treasury, powder in our magazines, arms in our stores, without a brigadier, engineers, expresses. By and by, when we shall be called upon to take the field, we shall not have a tent to lie in.